In this video, I want to go over some of the recent Cyberpunk 2077 news, in particular, a bit of a response and just new details to come out by CD Projekt Red in the wake of the recent delay of the game. CD Projekt is a publicly traded company, so after the news of the delay went live, they hosted an investor conference call where investors could ask questions around what was going on with the game and its future, some additional context as to why they delayed the game, and in particular, we got quite a bit in the way of details on their marketing strategy, including how exactly this hands-on experience is going to work. So in this video, I rounded up all of that information and I want to share it with all of you. An important reminder though, we're just 5 days away from the Night City Wire, what is shaping up to be a massive marketing push and contain a lot in the way of additional details, which we'll touch on in this video. Before going into the Q&A part of the conference call, they just gave a broad statement reiterating how the game is finished content and gameplay wise, but they need additional time to iron things out, and even further how CD Projekt recognizes that delays come at the cost of trust. So it's not something they're just throwing out there willy-nilly or taking for granted, although they also do feel that the new release date is still strategically sound, and that's something we're going to come back around to. One of the surprising parts, at least to me, was they describe how COVID was not a major reason for the delay. They mention how it didn't make things easier, but it also wasn't one of the driving factors, at least according to this Q&A. If you remember, the last time Cyberpunk was delayed, it was actually just before the virus outbreak, so somewhat unfortunate timing in that regard, but apparently it wasn't a major factor. And really, they describe how the main reason for the delay was they wanted to ensure the final touches of the game were complete. Right now, the game, again, is complete as far as questing goes, as far as gameplay goes, cutscenes, and it's not like there are major things that need to be overhauled or changed, but rather a lot of little things to make the game perfect. And overall, they don't want to rush the release. As far as what those little things are, 3 examples were given. A character is walking down the street and actually walks through a lantern as if it wasn't there, some lighting effects being wrong in certain circumstances, and one very direct one. If you walk out of a particular pub on a particular street at 4:01 a.m. exactly, night will turn to day for 3 seconds. I don't think that was so much an actual example of a bug that exists and they were fixing, or in reality I think it was more just this is the kind of thing they are focusing on right now. These are the things they want resolved before release. They mentioned numerous times that they believe November 19th is the final date. I'm not sure if they would actually say otherwise, but they're pretty confident the game will release November 19th. And during this Q&A, one person in particular really called them out. When the initial delay came from April to September, CD Projekt at the time in their investor call did describe how the delay was actually a longer time than they needed. September was chosen because they wanted to avoid a July or August release, citing holidays. So now this investor does question, well, is it not a similar thing with this November delay? Should we trust this delay even though the past delay you said was plenty of time? And even further, if their prediction was wrong in January when the initial delay came, why should we think that now their prediction in June will be accurate for this November release date? CD Projekt responds by saying that the game was much buggier in January, such that they could not show it to journalists at the time, where now they view the reality that the game can be shown to journalists as a major landmark for the game. We'll touch more on that in a moment. Overall, the work that needs to be completed now is much clearer. They know exactly what they have to do. For outsiders looking in, it may seem like the delay now and the delay in January was very similar, but internally things are quite different. And they conclude now, since what work is left to be done is much clearer, they're not worried about an additional time buffer. They're quite confident and certain that this will be enough time to complete the game. So overall, I find this delay talk to just be very, very odd. I'm all for delaying the game. I would much rather have a good game on release and wait a bit longer to get it. 2 months isn't really that bad. But as far as their justifications for it, it just seems weird to me. Citing minor bugs? I mean, yeah, of course, you want all of those minor bugs to be gone, especially if you are a perfectionist. But at least to me, none of these answers really register as being like, oh, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's almost like something else is going on. A lot of people are speculating that it could be something to do with the release of next-gen consoles. Maybe they want to boost in sales as a result of that, although I do remind you, this is an investor's call. It's not like they're trying to appease fans with this one. I'm sure that it is in their minds, but it's mainly talking to investors who are putting money into their company. So overall, again, I'm not really upset that it was delayed, but I'm still confused even with their most recent response. It still doesn't make a ton of sense to me. In particular, when you consider how solid things seemed beforehand. They made several statements making it seem like no more delays were on the way after that January delay. Although fortunately, they also go into the marketing push and what's coming with Night City Wire Wire in just 5 days from when this is uploaded. Although the game was delayed, nothing has changed around this event. They didn't really get too explicit as to what we'll see at the event itself, but they do get pretty explicit as to what we'll see right after it. As I described, journalists are currently playing the game, and right after Night City Wire, previews will be coming out. So you can expect previews from journalists late Thursday afternoon after Night City Wire concludes. Technically right now we don't actually have an official time for Night City Wire. Now as far as what exactly these journalists are gaining access to, they're getting the game from the start. So it'll be from the menu screen to character creation, and then they'll enter into the game world, but there'll be a time limit on the play session. So seemingly it'll be an open world. You'll have full access to Cyberpunk 2077, but only for a limited amount of time. CD Projekt says they might encounter some bugs. They hope they'll take into consideration that this is not a final product, and hopefully those bugs will be fixed by release. And one of the interesting parts, this is actually being streamed to journalists. They don't go into too much detail as to how exactly that'll work, just that the game will be streamed to journalist PCs. And just recently, one of the devs was spotted playing Cyberpunk 2077 via GeForce Now, so it's suspected that could be one of the methods. This is interesting though, because here they also mention that the game is being played worldwide. And of course, as you go from country to country, or even just continent to continent, there are some vast differences as far as internet speed goes, and you do have to expect that'll affect gameplay at least somewhat. I'm fortunate to live in an area where you don't really have bandwidth caps. I can get a pretty good internet speed at an affordable price, but if you go over to Australia, where you have to imagine at least some people will be playing this, it is very different. So I do wonder if this is something we see reflected in those initial impressions. As far as what exactly the impressions will be, it looks like you could talk about almost everything you saw, but you're only going to be talking about it. It's mentioned you'll be able to judge the game through the eyes of journalists, reading previews a week from now, and later how they'll be writing their initial reactions. I don't think the journalist here will be able to record gameplay, but rather they'll play the game and be able to type up an article or talk in a video, like this one, as to what exactly they saw. And one other point they actually make around this that's very interesting, as far as the marketing campaign overall, it's mentioned how every couple of weeks they plan to reveal more and more of the game. That was just said loosely at the end of a sentence while responding to a different question, but that should definitely get you excited for a couple of reasons. One, we've heard numerous times now how Night City Wire will kind of be the kicking off point for this marketing campaign, but more will be coming after this. But even further, as you hear about these hands-on demos, you do have to expect that perhaps there'll be subsequent ones. Maybe it's just the first batch will be the larger game journalists, and the second batch will be some smaller ones, more accessible, maybe more of a focus on certain markets. At one point it's a streamer push, at one point it's a YouTuber push. This is just speculation on my part, but it all is very interesting. Or even down the road, could we see a different segment of the game? Right now we're getting the start, but perhaps later on we'll see a couple of hours in, maybe the mid-game. A way to change up those impressions as you go from the first hands-on to the second. When it comes to the number of expansions this game is getting, there's been quite a bit of back and forth on this and kind of just coy remarks by CD Projekt. They mentioned in this call how they plan to reveal the number of expansions as a part of their marketing campaign, but it's coming later on, so they don't talk about anything yet. And actually during this, they even clarify how when they say expect not less expansions than The Witcher 3, which is a past statement they made, it's kind of a code word for you might expect a bit more. So it seems all but confirmed at this point that Cyberpunk 2077 will have more than 2 expansions. In the past, CD Projekt made statements how they almost wished The Witcher 3 got more expansions because of how popular they ended up being, and I doubt they'll make that same mistake again with how big the hype levels are for this game. But overall, the expansions as well as the multiplayer mode are accordingly delayed just as the game was. So it's not like we're going to start seeing expansions right after release just because the game was delayed. The game is described as being playable on both current gen and next gen consoles from day one. The next gen version of the game will look better from day one, but coming in 2021, they don't give an exact date, there will be a more comprehensive updated version of this game for next gen consoles. So right off the bat, things will be improved, but the fully improved proper next gen version is coming down the road, at least on consoles. And even further, they announce here that not only will users who buy it on Xbox One get a free upgrade to Xbox Series X, but also users who buy it on the PS4. So if you buy the game on PS4, you will get a free upgrade to the PS5 version. And this was another thing strengthening some of those theories or thoughts that the delay could be connected to the console release date. Although something mentioned by another YouTuber, that with the Triple S League, something interesting about the release date with this game, it is now posted just after the cutoff for the Game Awards and many other Game of the Year awards ceremonies. Could be totally unrelated, but it also could be a factor. The Witcher 3 of course dominated in the Game Awards, and it did see a big push as a result of that. Perhaps with Cyberpunk 2077, they were worried about going head-to-head with The Last of Us Part 2, of course, where Part 1 was a decade-defining game. Overall, though, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. We're on the cusp of a ton of new news around this game, and what will probably be a lot of details, just a constant flow of information. During that time, I'll try and bring you just about everything I can, so if you do want to get subscribed. But otherwise, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.